what I think is very important when we talk about inflation risk is this. And again, I'm going to talk a bit like an economist, but that's what I am, so don't hate me for it. But it's fascinating for me that when you take a look at where the U.S. unemployment rate is right now, it's 7.9%. And if you look at the Canadian unemployment rate on the same basis as the U.S. with the same labor force definition, it's 5.9%. So the Canadian unemployment rate is 2 percentage points below where it is in the U.S. And yet, when I take a look at where inflation is, inflation in Canada is 1%. Inflation in the U.S. is 2%. So I'm trying to wrap this around my head. Let's get this straight. Canada's got the lower unemployment rate by 2 percentage points, and the lower inflation rate by a full percentage point? What does that tell me as a macro research person? It's got to be telling me that something structural is happening in Canada, that our non-inflationary growth potential is picking up. And that's exactly what it's telling me. How can we, and this is very rare, have lower unemployment rate than the U.S. and lower inflation? It's telling me something about productivity. And it's telling me the makeup of the economy is diverging from what it is in the U.S. It's interesting, I was talking to one of my friends earlier who was here, one of my former friends from Merrill Lynch, George Stevenson, and George said, well, I didn't realize that Canada is growing the same rate as the U.S. Yeah, it's called it 1.5%, 2%. Canada's no longer booming. But what's interesting is when you take a look at what's driving the U.S. economy right now, it's not capital spending. Capital spending is actually going down. Housing is going up. And in Canada, Canada had its housing boomlet a couple of years ago. Housing's rolling over. But the strongest component of the Canadian economy right now is capital spending. Now, what would you rather have drive your economy? Housing? Now, the house is great. We all talk about housing, right? Housing is absolutely wonderful. You live in your house, bring up your kids in your house, entertain in your house. But a house is basically a large ticket consumer durable item. It doesn't add to the productive capital stock of the economy. Capital spending has replaced housing and consumer spending as the single largest growth component of the Canadian economy. And as an economist, I got to tell you something, that really turns me on. So what I'm starting to see in Canada take place is capital formation and private sector capital stock, and it's starting to show up in this very arcane statistic called multi-factor productivity. Not just labor productivity, but how labor and capital commingle. I'm starting to notice productivity in Canada is starting to actually surpass where it is in the United States, and this is very rare, and it's very important for the Canadian dollar. Remember, there are two components to the economy. Productivity, as we look at the supply side, and there's population. And I'm getting strong signals from both that we're seeing some structural changes in Canada that are leading to an increase in the non-inflationary growth potential, and that is very important for rates return on capital, very important for where the Canadian dollar is going to be going over the next 3, 5, maybe even longer in terms of how many years we're going to forecast out. Remember, productivity and population. I'm just going to finish off with the population part. Remember I talked about fat tail and thin tail. This is an ironclad forecast that I will give you tonight, is that 9 months from now, Canada is going to embark on a baby boom of epic proportions. And I say that because when there's no hockey on Saturday night, I'll leave it there. Thanks for indulging me.
All of my partners at Gluskin Sheff, I want to thank all of you for your attention this evening, for listening, and for all the fine questions. It's been a really wonderful engagement with you, and I think you can all see why Gluskin Sheff is so proud to have Dave Rosenberg on our team. He offers fantastic insights to our team, and he's a wonderful partner. So, on behalf of all of us, thank you very much. Finally, I want to thank John Prado and the wonderful staff of the Canadian Consulate General for hosting this evening. We're very privileged and very honored. For those of you who are clients already, thank you very much for the trust that you've shown in us. It's a privilege to serve you. For those of you who are interested in what we do, as I say, all great investments start with a conversation, so please don't be shy. Approach any of us anytime, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thanks very much.